Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 11th episode of the People's Empowerment Podcast, a podcast brought to you by Empower the People. And we're here to empower the people. And today you're in for a very special treat. So I've actually got one of the team joining me. We've got Chris Lundy here, who you may have seen around if you're a member of ETP. He's just joined us kind of recently, the past few months, and he's really been he's hit the ground rolling. He's been helping people with crypto, but also taking some breakout rooms and the meetings and speaking about this incredible healing journey he's been going on. So I'm really excited to get into all of that. So, hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Travis, for having me.
No worries, man. It's a pleasure. It's an honor, in fact. So, would you like to give an introduction to everybody, just to give them a bit of an overview of who you are and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. That's the existential question. Who are we really? But that's a longer answer.
Like
My
a
name is
show
Chris
in
Lundy.
itself.
Um, oh, indeed, indeed. Um, my name is Chris Lundy. I'm from the United States of America. I was born in the Southwest, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Actually, it's where my father's family is from. And when I was born in central Albuquerque along the plains. If you've ever seen pictures of Albuquerque, New Mexico, if you ever watched Breaking Bad, that's like my hometown, literally. So, and what goes on there today is literally what you see in the show.
Okay.
So that's what I was born into, right? I was born into the actual set of Breaking Bad, literally and figuratively. So it was an interesting beginning. My family were avid dirt bikers. There was lots of empty space in the desert before there were desert patrols. So it was kind of like an old west type of feel. That mystique was still there in the 1970s in the southwestern parts of the U.S. So there's lots of target shooting. There's lots of hunting. There's lots of going out on your ATVs, your four wheelers, dirt bikes especially. There's lots of professional race biking that goes on in that area. It's well known in the race community. Many people in my family actually worked at the Harley Davidson uh, uh, factories and stores. My uncle actually was a shop manager. I think he still is a shop manager for a Harley shop down there. So my family come from a very strong automotive background on both sides of my family. I have an uncle, Iron Man Ingram, is a NASCAR Hall of Famer. He's my great grandmother's son. So I had a lot of high achievers around me. Unfortunately for me, you know, my entry into this world was not going to be painted quite as interestingly at the beginning. I had a this what I thought was a bump or like a birthmark on the top of my head, like very close to the top of my crown chakra, like towards the back, and it was called a sebaceous nevi, and the establishment medical literature said that it was a benign mark. There was no problem, but that's not the case. Um, Later, it became clear that there was a serious problem, but at the time, there was nothing to worry about, so nothing was done about it. But in 1981, I started to get some very serious problems with my vision. I was almost completely squinting my eyes shut anytime the sun was out. I had trouble walking because I couldn't see in front of my face, and there were problems. So my mother took me to a specialist, and they had to have eye surgery to correct my eyes from drifting too far apart from the center of my head to the point of where I was going to go blind. So that operation was done when I was 2 years old, and that was just kind of the beginning of what I was going to experience. Because the aspects of my health journey just involve the physical manifestations; they involve things that happened to me in real life, and that became apparent later in the 1980s when I was young. In 1989, uh, I I was at, I believe, a holiday gathering towards the end of that year. It was Christmas 1989. I was 10 years old at the time. And that was the first time I had a spiked punch bowl without knowing what I was drinking. And I got very sick. And yeah, it's like you snicker, you laugh, and it's like when you think about it, yeah, that's kind of funny. But at the time, it was a nightmare for me. I had a very bad headache,
It
and
is.
I ended up being sick in bed. Yeah, I was sick in bed for weeks. Alcohol exposure to young people is, your bodies aren't developed enough to be able to handle it. Not that it's good for you to consume in the first place, but but my reaction to that, because I've seen people, on television recover from a bender after a day, but I was really sick. So it spoke to some type of underlying issue because I had a really, my head was extraordinarily hot for weeks. And, I was running a really high fever. And, that's when I knew that was the first time I had a clue, like within that year time frame that happened. And I was on a road trip outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, in that same desert, visiting my family in the Southwest. And I had this uncontrollable itch all the way down my right leg, and nothing I could do to could make it go away. And eventually, I just put some skin oil on it, and I just assumed it was a really bad itch or got bit by a bug or something. That wasn't the case. It ended up being a bigger problem down the line. But these things grew over time, and the biggest change for me was in 1990. I was medically kidnapped, and I was experimented on with a wide variety of different psychotropic drugs, mainly Prozac and Thorazine simultaneously when I was first imprisoned. Uh, I'm not going to go over all the details as to how I got there because there's limited time here. So, uh, but what I can say is that if we look at the current agendas that are in play now, and we look at what happened to me then, um, there's an alarming parallel because the first thing they told me when I got into that situation, which would have been around this time of year, 33 years ago, they told me the first thing they said to me was that I was going to be in that facility for 2 weeks and I would go home, which I think everybody heard pretty loud and clear at the beginning of 2020. So essentially, these places were rehearsal grounds for the next stage of their agenda. And it was not publicly acknowledged. It was not a very well known thing. They were thought of as rehabilitation facilities, but they were nothing. That was not the case. Simply not the case because any of the children that refused to take the drugs were placed in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. And if they still
Well,
didn't comply, then they put them in a lockup ward. And if they still didn't comply, they would get disappeared. And these trafficking networks were eventually exposed in the Franklin scandal of 1989 publication, The Washington Times, that revealed a human trafficking ring that was supplying young boys from Boys Town in Nebraska to members of the White House. And the White House at the time was the George Herbert Walker Bush White House. So it could have been him, it could have been his family members, it could have been his chief of staff, it could have been a number of people that were inside of that building. And it was quickly buried in the media. But I probably became this close to being trafficked in that particular situation. I'm just lucky I ended up in Colorado instead of Nebraska, or else I would have been ended up being a statistic. So I've been kind of dancing on the edges of reality outside of the scope of what you see on the street because I saw it from behind the scenes at a very young age. And I was in that situation for about 6 years of my life until I got out. And the only reason I got out was because I caught my captors withholding evidence from a judge, and I handed it to the judge. And
well, okay.
the judge, the judge found them in contempt of court for perjury, and I was really, it was ordered that I was released to my family with immediate effect. They appealed that decision, and I ended up going into another facility for like 6 more months. So, and then I finally got out. They let go of their custody claims over me the day before my 18th birthday when I came of age in 1997. So it was a monumental feat just to escape my childhood alive. So that was the first hurdle I overcame. And at that point, from like the late 1990s on, I was just completely lost. I've had the maturity of probably a 12 or 13-year-old boy. I didn't have any exposure to the public. I was locked up, so I didn't really know how to interact with people anymore because it had been so long. And it took some time for me to readjust to being able to walk down the street uninterrupted and do basic things that normal people do. And because I saw the inside of the police state before people even really had any type of public consciousness that existed in the first place. They had all these sensationalized ideas of what the American experience is. And then my health got a lot worse, and I didn't know why. I was getting rashes up and down my body. I was having vision disturbances. I would have heart palpitations. My resting heart rate would go well above 100 BPM, sometimes as high as 130 for no reason while I'm just sitting there. And things gradually got worse and worse to the point of where I was getting 10 years down the line, which would have been, or 20 years down the line, 2021, things really started to get bad. I was getting wounds that wouldn't heal on my legs, my arms, my face. And initially the diagnosis was skin cancer, but I turned out that I had glioblastoma, and spinal lymphoma that spread throughout my entire skeletal system, throughout my entire lymphatic system, and I was probably months away from dying. And that turned out to be the case. In 2022, last year, which would have been 2 years after I met Simone Marshall, who started ETP. Uh, she was in communication with me at the time. She was very worried because she hadn't heard from me in the better part of 2 months. She thought something had happened to me, and she was right. Um, Two things happened to me. One, I was laying down for bed, and I couldn't. Suddenly, I felt this very tight constriction around the center of my of like uh, my lungs, my lung, you know, this area here around my breastbone, and my lungs, upper respiratory area. And I couldn't breathe at all. So I kept a bottle of N-acetylcysteine by my bed, and I took 10 grams of it and drank about half a gallon of distilled water, and my heart rate went down, and I survived. That was the closest I came to dying. And then uh, around that time, I became aware of Rick Simpson oil. That was the first thing that started to work. I was starting to make some recoveries at that point, but I was getting faster. I was getting worse a lot better, a lot faster than I was getting better. I needed more medicine, and I couldn't afford more Rick Simpson oil. I was tapped out at that point. I had lost my job in late 2021, so I was without income at that point, and I ended up discovering a silver ionization treatment that I invented myself, actually, and I have with me one of the devices. I just wanted to show it to the audience.
Cool.
So
Yeah, let's have
I
a look.
first discovered this a little appliance. I first discovered this appliance in 2016 when I was researching it on YouTube because I had like some skin tags when I was cycling. My athletic activity of choice is cycling. I love it. When I was in peak fitness, I was running between 60 to 80 kilometers daily without fail, 6 days a week. But I was sick. I was dying of cancer, and I was still able to put out that level of physical intensity. I was that determined to stay fit. But so I just wanted to make people aware of that first. Like, even if you think you're fit, you can still have a problem. But anyway, so I looked at a skin tag removal tool, and I found something that's made by this company in Miami, Florida. It's called the Wardebator, and the website is wardebator.com. This is what it looks like. So this device has a little A23 battery inside it. It has 4 screws on each end that you can take out over here, and then this part lifts off, and then you can replace the battery, and it goes dead, periodically. But when you can turn this on to the high position, so I would keep that on in that particular manner, and when I did that, and I took this probe here, and then I attached this probe to a silver coin placed on my navel. I felt like a volcano erupted in my lymphatic system. In fact, the first
Fascinating.
treatment I did was on the top of my head. The first treatment I did was on the top of my head. I placed the silver coin directly on the top of this side of my head here, right around where my finger is pointing. I placed a coin there. I put the probe right on this with it powered on. Sparks started to fly off of the silver. It started arcing like something inside of like a machine shop. It was quite astounding. And then I felt something come up like the center of my leg, up the side of my body, through my shoulders, up through my jaw, unwrap around my ear, and then just explode at the top of my head. And I felt this massive amount, I could see this massive amount of saliva coming out of my mouth and tears pouring down my face. And that's when I realized that I discovered something very significant. And I alerted everyone I could find, anybody that could listen. I put it on blast on Telegram, and I got censored relentlessly. And that's when I knew I discovered something really big, because I was getting censored left and right, even on so-called freedom-loving groups. So I was like, okay, this is big. So what I did was I started asking around. It's like, I need some type of scientific evidence behind this, or people are going to just think that I'm some sort of like, uh, some sort of quackery guy. And I was pointed to the research of Dr. Robert Otto Becker. He was the head of orthopedics at State University of New York, SUNY, uh, in downstate, I believe. Spent a lot of time in the Syracuse campus as well. And he was one of the major pioneers of electrical medicine in the United States of America. In fact, he developed a silver ionization treatment that he was able to successfully regrow tissues in laboratory mice, cured osteomyelitis in a critically ill patient, which is a lethal bone infection. And he was also able to successfully um, confirm destruction of free radical tissue, including cancer cells. It rebalances the body's electrical pathways. And I found a way to do, and another thing is that silver ions, when they come into contact with hard tissues in the body, whether it's bone tissue, cartilage tissue, it immediately on contact forms stem cells. So it literally regrows and heals tissues inside of your body. I had a friend of mine that had a blown out knee from an injury, I believe playing volleyball or something like this. And I believe it was a ligament tear, something like this. ACL, as I recall. She took this treatment and left it on her knee for about a day. Within a day, she went from about 10% range of motion to 92% in one day. And I was amazed, and I was, 100% of my proofs of concept were successful with this. And then the third thing I discovered was a massager called the Med Massager. You can see it on medmassager.com. That's MED massager.com. They have a foot massager and a body massager. So, as a proof of concept, what I did was I turned on this massager. It has, like, I believe 11 speed positions, as I recall. I turned it up to position 6, which is about 50% strength or something like this, maybe slightly more. And I put a pillow on it, put it up against like a soft surface because it vibrates very rapidly. It could probably damage like a shelf or something like this, or directly against a wall, or you can do it outside against a tree or something, and plug it into a power source and lean back on it. And I felt, the tumors start to disintegrate inside of my lymphatic system when I was laying back on it and doing the silver treatment simultaneously and taking riximson oil to deal with the pain. So, considering how far along I was, just taking riximson oil for me by itself was not going to help me unless I took it in significantly higher doses. But those three things together were what were able to get me past the point of no return and to the point of where I'm able to even have this interview at all. So I'm just lucky and thankful that I figured out some methodologies in a pretty short space of time when, I was running out of time, frankly.
That's incredible, man. There's so much you touched on there, and as you were talking, I had lots of things to pick apart there. But just to say that that's amazing that you have come to where you are now, man. And I think it's incredible when people they like have the bravery and the courage to step outside the mainstream medical institution and find their own way of trying to heal their body. I think it's amazing, man. And there's quite a resurgence of that happening. So it's really, really cool to be a part of that. And there was something, as you were saying, you was going through. There was a line that's really, really quite important, I think, for the audience, and that's how you were saying that even though you physically you were kind of fit and you could do your exercise, you still had an issue. And you said about, hey, watch out if you even if you think you're physically fit, there might be an issue somewhere else. And that touches on what I've spent a lot of time focusing on too, and how there's more than just a physical body. There's the energy, the emotions. There's so much going on here. And hearing anecdotally of people that are fit as a fiddle and then they suddenly die, and it's like, yeah, but why? How does that happen? And so it's very interesting to hear you relay that back, saying that even though you had physical health, there was still something going on there, and it touches on so much within within the health of the human body on just that. So it's very interesting. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that specifically? What your thoughts are on that?
Well, I think that what most people think are just standard problems like a headache or floaters in your eyes or perhaps you're a little bit flat-footed. These have been passed off as just nagging things that everyone deals with or normalized in some way. But really, the fact that I had so-called flexible flat feet, that was my diagnosis from a podiatrist, as if it was some type of physical deformity. Well, that physical deformity was caused by cancer wrapped around my bones that was literally pulling my toes apart and causing my toes to my toenails to ingrow to the point of where I had to have toenail surgery at one point. So, you know, I thought that that was simply a defect with my body, like there's just something chronically wrong with me. But there's always this assumption in the medical establishment that there's no problem. So you don't think there is a problem. I didn't think there was a problem because I was still able to get up, do my power breakfast, ride my face off for 3, 4 hours. By midday, I'm, having my ties with my girlfriend, and the day is great. and then 6 years later, I'm, almost dead. That didn't make sense to me either. And then when it became clear that all those symptoms I were having, from almost going blind at 2 to my leg itching like crazy, those were all symptoms of the cancer spreading through my body and creating a reaction that you think is an itch, or that you think is just something in your eye, needed to put an eye drop in there. No. Uh-uh. It's something far worse. And I think that we are being lied to about this on a massive scale. Because if you look at big pharma commercials now, I watched them late last year because I was in a position to watch them, and I rarely watch television if ever. But I was watching television at the time, and the pharmaceutical commercials were openly stating that they expected 50% of all adults in the United States to be diagnosed with cancer, as if it's normal. So what's going to cause that, I wonder. So regardless of how that happens, whether it's what you're putting in your body through, an inoculation, or through your food, or through the air you're breathing, or the water you're consuming, or all of the above, these have contributing factors, yes. But in my case, I was born with this illness, and it's been slowly, it's like been a ticking time bomb that nobody knew was even there to begin with. So it puts the lie to the idea that scientists and science itself is infallible. The whole point of the scientific method is to find fallacy and correct it. That's how science has been distorted in the eyes of the public. And that's where a lot of people get led astray, is because the control of the language narrows what a person feels is, or a human feels, is their birthright, is to, is to live freely and to live healthfully. And when I discovered that the cannabis plant, it destroys cancer on contact when it's properly processed, uh, I've been, it's almost like I've had the answer right in front of me my whole life, because I've been a cannabis user since I was 20 years old. I didn't know that if you processed it into an oil and put it on your skin, it would destroy skin cancer. I didn't know that. You know, I heard rumors about somebody in Canada that did it in the 2000s, but it was quickly disappeared from the American media. It wasn't easily accessible to me at the time. I didn't know where to look. And then when I discovered it, when my business partner brought it to my attention, I was very grateful to them, and they saved my life. So there were people involved in what you're doing, Travis, and what other people that have interviewed me are doing, in wide variety of success. People that are worth millions of dollars came to my aid. So for me, it's very encouraging, because that means that I have something valuable that they know needs to be heard. So I don't feel anywhere as near as much worry as I once did about trivial matters such as my career or my relationships, because the last 3 years showed just how trivial that type of concern is. It's about finding a more reliable network of people to be able to interact with, that do what they say they're going to do, instead of just, put marketing pitches around and then move the goalposts and engage in all this propaganda warfare. That's what I discovered in my previous professional life. And now that I have come into a situation where I'm providing for myself 100% of the time, because of what I've discovered with health, as the number one most important thing, regardless of anything else that I figured out how to do. That's the most important thing that people need to be aware of, because we don't know what type of poisons are going to come around next. So the more antidotes we have to them, and the better we take care of ourselves, the better off we'll be. But I tried to exercise my way out of my problems, and it almost cost me my life. So I just want to I want to impress upon the audiences: you cannot exercise your way out of health problems. It is a lie. You have to have real healing. It is as simple as that.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, because if that we're like this holistic being that has and the energy centers flowing, we've got the whole mind state, the beliefs, and then the emotions. All of this is going on. Like you say, you can run on the
Right.
treadmill forever, but if that's not sorted out, you're really in trouble here. And there's
Indeed.
two big questions actually I'd like to get into before we go on to the next segment. Was
Mhm.
firstly, just how are you now? Like, what's your energy levels like? Are you taking the same sort of protocols that you mentioned? Have you changed or altered anything?
Well, when I was really sick, I was not able to get out of bed. I actually for the all of April 2023 this year, I was not able to walk under my own power. I had to use a crutch just to get to the restroom, which is right across the hallway, and that was hard, And I was not able to work. I wasn't able to do anything, So there were long periods of the course of the last year and a half that I had to stay in my bed and get the massage treatments from my Tempur-Pedic bed, which has a built-in massager frame, and I just keep that running in 15-minute intervals as many times as I need to throughout the day, usually for as much as 8 to 10 hours a day. I'll lay down on it and I'll type on my laptop and get my work done. That's how I was able to communicate with people because I was immobilized completely. That's what I was doing then, and I'm pretty much still doing the same thing. My stable weight is up significantly. I've actually gained weight to a point of where I would have previously considered myself to potentially be on the verge of being obese, but I'm just more muscular because the cancer has been gradually getting disintegrated, but the way that it spreads is almost like a maypole. It folds in on itself. It reties itself in this endless knot that it continuously ties, and almost like geometric precision, mathematical geometric precision. That's the best way I can describe it. It's almost like it has a mind of its own in many ways. So that's what I feel when I'm doing the treatments. Is like I'll literally feel like something is stuck inside of my spinal column, and then it will just you know unwind in one direction and another, and then just kind of fall away. I'll feel it like come across my my entire abdominals, come back up to my clavicle, and then back down and start unraveling again, like a machine, like wheels in a counting house. It's like being caught in a vortex. So that told me a lot about disease and how systemic it is and how you can reverse it. And what I discovered about negative polarity electrical medicine is that it does exactly that. It reverses the progression of disease, literally. People have told me I look 20 years younger because I do. You know, I was half bald. I had very difficult times in my life where I just couldn't grow hair on my face and took forever for it to grow. And my hair wasn't red. It was like gray, solid gray on both sides, and kind of like this reddish, brownish gray. My hair did not have a lot of vitality to it. Now, the color of my hair has been restored. So I'm that's the in terms of the physical manifestations of what I'm doing in terms of a treatment perspective. I ran out of Rick Simpson oil, so I kept up the other two, and that was more than effective by itself. And I've been in the process of producing more. I've produced at least almost 200 grams worth of Rick Simpson oil, but that's being divvied up between me and other members of my family before I do anything else with it. And I've still got quite a bit of source material to go through to complete making that. So once that's made, I'm going to take 100 grams over 100 days, 1 gram daily for a little over 3 months, and see if that can help accelerate the process, because I've been underdosing Rick Simpson oil for an extended period of time, and I need to fix that problem, because when I was dosing consistently and doing the rest of the treatments, my healing time was a lot more rapid. It's rapid now, but the more multiplier effects you're able to put into your protocol, for me, those three are have worked with every single person that's had similar symptoms to me. In fact, I was able to successfully determine uh, uh, that a close friend of mine had brain cancer, and they were crying, they were shocked, they knew they had a problem, they didn't know it was life threatening. Unfortunately, it was caught in time, got properly diagnosed, and they started those protocols, and they're getting better. So I've been able to save people's lives. A friend of mine, Todd Pittner, who runs the Decentralized.tv with Mike Adams, a very popular show in the freedom community, as well as Mike Adams. He's well known, millions of followers. He's founder of Brighteon.com as well. So Todd, he had an issue where he got a cut on his leg. He lives down in Tampa Bay area, Florida, in the southeastern United States. And he got a sepsis infection topically on his leg. And he was facing a decision where he was going to have to go to the emergency room, and I begged him not to, because he just bought 20 grams of Rick Simpson oil. And I advised him, like, put that on that wound and take 1/2 gram minimum daily under your tongue and swallow after 60 seconds. Repeat until that infection is gone. In 4 days, it was gone. A potentially lethal topical sepsis infection that was on the verge of spreading throughout his entire bloodstream. You can't just treat that topically. Sepsis will spread to all tissues, and it will kill you fast if you don't do something about it. and I saved his life. So I saved my own life. I saved Top Pitner's life, and he was just overjoyed in terms of thanking me for it. And he's been pretty busy, so I haven't been able to pick up with him. But I've saved prominent people's lives in the freedom community, and that's won me a lot of credibility. So that's one of the reasons why I'm on this show, I think. So, because I present my life in gratitude rather than in regret or in frustration. Sometimes I get that way, but when it comes to actually taking action, my intention is much more geared towards gratitude rather than trying to force an outcome, because that's how I was conditioned to live. That's what I was conditioned to do at a young age, is just to go hard all the time for someone else's benefit. And I'm simply not willing to do that anymore. And that's why I'm getting better.
I think that's amazing, man. And you actually answered my what was going to be my second question in that answer, and that was has he helped anybody else with, or you talk about that, and that's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. That if it's one thing getting results for yourself, but then to be able to help someone else, it's like wow, that's incredible. So you're clearly onto something here, which is really really cool. And I
Yeah.
think that's amazing how you was like framing it because like obviously the state of mind is very, very important, but what you're going through in the grand scheme of it all, the fact that you made it through it and the way you've done it, yeah, you could go on to help a lot of people, especially. Well, I've seen it. I've seen loads of other people in this field just go through the same sort of things, maybe different illness, but they go through a very tough time. They find their alternative, and then it turns into this like quest to help everybody else with the same thing, which is really, really cool. All right.
Right.
Well, that's been very, very, very interesting and insightful. Unless you have anything more you'd like to throw in that you might have missed that we didn't cover, it'd be good to get into what we're going to talk about next.
Well, one thing I wanted to add is that there were two primary ways I attempted to cope with brain cancer that I didn't know I had over the course of my 20s and 30s. Well, there's three. One was I was easily manipulated into joining communities that were bad for me. So I was associating with people that were kind of in a similar state of mind, that were angry about things. I drank a lot of alcohol because it was the only thing that took the pain away. And I also pursued personal relationships, specifically romantic relationships, that were bad for me, because I simply felt that if I had one, my life would be better. That's how simplistic my thinking was in terms of these types of things. I was looking for a quick fix all the time. I was not a drug addict. I never did drugs or anything like that. I was even hesitant to use cannabis. I felt like it was something that people of low social rapport did, because the people I was around at the time when I first started using cannabis weren't exactly. I felt they weren't setting a very good example to me in terms of like their influence in my direction in life, and I associated their lifestyle with that. But I was incorrect in that assumption. So it's important to revisit things that you've tried in the past or that you didn't really go into more deeply, because once I figured out that cannabis was the solution the entire time, that was it's not the only one. That will help you steer clear of people that are trying to force you into one methodology rather than giving you a complete picture of what you need to get yourself well. So, trusting yourself and finding people of integrity is easier whenever you're armed with knowledge. So I think that pretty much ties it off well, though, before we go on to the next segment.
That was awesome. That last bit there, that's almost a quote in itself. Was it trusting yourself and finding integrity? Could you just repeat that? That's brilliant.
We can review the recording and then put
Yeah,
it in
let's
the
do
show
that.
notes.
Let's
How's
do
that?
that. Make,
Because
make a clip or
sometimes I
something.
just get it kind of in the zone, especially
Yeah.
after so the audience is aware. I do grow my own cannabis. It is legal to grow throughout half of the United States now, so there's no fear of utilizing this wonderful healing herb. And I produced quite a decent amount for myself and my family. They've been very grateful to me for that, and you know, yeah, I just feel very vindicated, because these were things I had been trying to get through to people that offered nothing but resistance to me for well over a generation, 18 plus years. And now people are starting to ask questions. There's a very strong ignorance barrier in my private life with some people that I know. I'm not going to say who they are, but it doesn't mean that I care about them any less. I just don't want to see people die for no reason. That's what Rick Simpson himself, that invented Rick Simpson oil, was so upset about. He saw people all around him dying for no reason, and you know, the rest is history with him. He's very well known in his advocacy for cannabis medicine. In fact, Rick Simpson oil is now the standard of care throughout all of Europe for the amelioration and elimination of opioid dependencies. So the opioid crisis is something that's torn through America for a quarter of a century. You know, I mentioned in a previous interview that it's absolutely criminal. This isn't being discussed. It is high time, no pun intended, to get this done. We've got to get this done now because it is our strongest ally in this fight.
Awesome, man. Cool. All right. Yeah. So let's touch on the world of
That,
crypto
yeah,
because I myself know a
okay.
little bit about, but I'm sure a lot of people here don't know very much about it at all. It's still sort of growing in its popularity quite a lot. So give us a bit of a rundown
Hmm.
on this weird and wonderful world.
Okay, well, I first became aware of cryptocurrency at its inception, 2008, 2009 timeframe. And just for the audience's awareness, there will be another interview where I go into this in a little bit more detail. Actually, I dedicate more than an hour to it. I did that interview a few weeks ago. And that's with Mike Donovan of Spark Media. He's also with gbunites.com. It's on his YouTube channel. It has not yet been published, but when it is, we perhaps can add that to the show notes at a later date. But I go into it in more detail there. But to keep it succinct for the audience, I became aware of Bitcoin when it was first there. I was looking at documentation on how to mine it. I was looking at YouTube videos of people that had stacks of Citrix and VMware servers that were mining Bitcoin 24/7, and they were getting thousands and thousands and thousands of them just as a proof of concept. But it was interesting, but there were a couple of things about Bitcoin I didn't like. One, it's transparent, and if you compare cash to Bitcoin, nobody knows that you're spending cash, but everybody knows that you're spending Bitcoin because it's the most traceable cryptocurrency on Earth. It's very easy to find out where those funds are going. So that's the first thing I didn't like. And the second thing I didn't like was that, well, one of many things, but it was made known to me that the project uh, development path was taken over by the Bilderberg Group, specifically by Henri de Castries himself, who's the chairman of the Bilderberg Group, put together a uh, company that he assembled developers for, and they went in and undermined the Bitcoin protocol to such an extent that they replaced, well, they put in a function within Bitcoin called replace by fee, which allows you to kind of dial up or down the fee that you want to pay for a transaction to see if it goes through. But the problem with that is that whenever that blockchain is congested, those fees can be $20, it can be $100, they can be as high as like $200 for a single transaction whenever there's congestion on the network because of the way that the blockchain is designed with small blocks rather than large ones. And this is what led to projects such as Bitcoin SV and Bitcoin Cash. Uh, and that is essentially the first split was in 2014 to 2016 timeframe when a lot of these alternative Bitcoin investments are coming around. Ethereum became a thing around that time. Monero came into existence. And then I started doing more research on Monero in 2017, around the time that it was very inexpensive in price, maybe like between $1 to $10. And I really liked what I saw. This was a not a transparent blockchain. It was untraceable. It utilized um, continue a technology called ring CT, where each ring represents an extra layer of what's called an anon set or an anonymity set, and the anonymity set exponentially gets larger and larger the longer the blockchain runs. It's just absolutely phenomenal technology. They're currently working on quantum resistance for the protocol, and in many ways, it's more secure than cash and easier to transport. So when I saw these functions, I realized that I'd come across a legitimate innovation, but I was very hesitant to dip my toe in the water because I didn't really understand the full truth of what I was reading at the time. It was more of a hobby thing. It wasn't something that I had uh, the physical hardware capable of mining cryptocurrency at the time. But one of the great things about crypto now is that if you want to obtain it, it's easy to do it if you want to mine and you don't want to buy. And I mine Monero. I encourage everyone to mine Monero. It's very easy to mine, especially on Linux. You get 10% better performance on Linux mining Monero. And it's the essential and most important blockchain for cash. So if you are just getting into crypto, Monero, in my opinion, is the first and only thing you should put your funds into. It tends to be more stable than other cryptocurrencies. It is volatile, but it is extensive, has a very large network, it's very well capitalized, and it's essentially unbreakable. The IRS actually put out a bounty to crack Monero, and no one's collected on it. So that should tell you a lot. If the IRS can't pay somebody hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to crack Monero, that means that the intelligence establishment can't do it either. So they're just looking for some, script kiddies that want to get out of a life of abject poverty or whatever circumstances they may be in that may be vulnerable to that type of deception to go and try to crack it. But that's
Oh
that
yes,
made me realize that yeah that made me realize that it's important to pay attention to this because there's a reason why governments are going after crypto is because it makes their entire authoritarian agenda irrelevant uh, when focused on in that context. But I'll pause for a question if you want to get one in because I can speak to that in a minute.
yeah,
But
sure. It was actually I quickly Googled that and it's like, oh yeah, I can see
mhm,
$625,000 if you can crack Monero from the IRS. That's really funny. Uh, but as
yeah,
well,
you
it's
can't even
called
buy a good hacker for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't seem. I would have thought better they could have put a bit more for that. But yeah.
Mm,
So it's cool to hear you say about Monero. I've looked into it a little bit, and I only looked into crypto a little bit, and I'm sure same with many people listening. But it sounds really cool. There's like people get worried like the idea of a cashless society at the moment. It sounds really bad because of the current political system and the way that we wouldn't be able to trust whoever's running all of that stuff. But if there was some way to have the technology and it's not corrupted by that aspect, and maybe we keep cash, I don't know, but even just to have that technology is used more, I think is really amazing. It's clearly, like you say, more efficient. You can just carry a USB, for example, or whatever, and you can carry all of that value, and there's many other benefits. So it did seem like a really positive thing. But I guess it's like with a lot of things, with like even the money creation, we can you talk a lot about that, but won't get too much into that. But the fact that that's sort of been perverted and corrupted. So the same thing with crypto. It seems like it's almost it's neutral technology that could be used for good or evil. It depends on
mhm.
who's in position there. But all
Yeah,
right, man.
indeed.
Yeah, go
And
on. Anything more to add?
well, I just wanted to mention what is cryptocurrency and what is not, just as a basic definitional standpoint. Crypto is your encryption layer. Currency is money or something that's fungible that you can use as money. That was the original idea behind cryptocurrency. Most things that you see in the so-called cryptocurrency market are not even close to that. They are projects that are transparent that utilize a blockchain database technology as the functional basis layer for their operations, whether it be through the creation of a gas token on a layer one network such as Theta or um, self-financing capabilities to bring passive income methodologies to the people. So there are tremendous opportunities in the transparent blockchain space that utilizes cryptocurrency technology but is not private. There's a difference between the privacy sector and other sectors. So you can have public assets and still own them privately, but you have to have the proper methodologies in place in order to protect yourself and your identity. There's things that you need to avoid doing. And the number one thing I advise people not to do is to utilize what's called know your customer procedures. Because anytime an exchange gets hacked or a financial institution gets hacked, that's how they get your personal details. And then you've got hackers or thieves that know where you live. And this is how people get held up at ransom for their Bitcoin or get held up at ransom for their crypto. So it's not, in my opinion, not a good idea to use that except for very small amounts such as like a prepaid crypto debit card with minimal KYC procedures that has better security, like that of a commercial bank, something like this, because they have the best technology in the world. They get hacked, but they're good. So that is something that if you're trying to utilize crypto, especially in Europe, getting crypto debit cards is a good way to use that. There's one that's available all over Europe. It's actually called the Litecoin card. Litecoin-card.com, I believe, is the URL. But you can go to the Litecoin Foundation's website, and you can look up all the information on the Litecoin card. So there's easy ways to gain access to uh, tools that you can use to spend your crypto easily, and I utilize them for the better part of a year. Unfortunately, here in the United States, crypto debit cards have come under assault. They're very difficult to find. There are a few that are available, but the prepaid ones have had some issues in terms of their availability and finding liquidity backers. So once the environment changes for the better, I think that people will see crypto and cash essentially as the same thing, and it will provide accountability to the financial system that we haven't been able to get in the past. Because you're not going to find at audits of the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve or the Bank of International Settlements or the Swiss National Bank. It's not going to happen. But with blockchain, you have access to all these things. You know exactly what's being moved and where. So it provides accountability to us, but also privacy to us. It makes it easier for us to get receipts for something like, the payment of or the repair of a car, or for a contract to purchase a home, or a contract to do anything. That's where smart contracts come into play. So it makes it easier for people to participate with each other without having their resources secreted away. And I think it's the biggest innovation in human history other than the internet and probably the invention of the car. So I, it's not going anywhere. 25% of the United States public has or is currently using cryptocurrency, much higher in the global south, significantly higher in the Middle East, especially in Lebanon, where well over 75 to 80% of the population is utilizing it on a daily basis. And that's been the case for years. So this is eventually going to become known to people in the West. It's just that the rest of the world is kind of ahead of us a little bit. So I encourage people to stay on top of things geopolitically, educate yourself, and you'll be able to kind of get ahead of some of the changes that are coming. And the best way to do that is get yourself some privacy crypto, and make sure that you have access to precious metals, and work well and build local communities. Get involved with people that already have resources that they can provide you with, and that's what I've been. Just take action. You you are what you have been waiting for, and this is the biggest opportunity. This is what we have been waiting for. This moment. Because all the conditions are ripe for creating alternative systems that can exist independently of what's coming down the road. And that's why the agenda isn't going to happen. It's dead in the water because it contradicts natural law, contradicts reality. You know, because the people that put it together are insane. They need help. And so it's also about working on yourself, because I guarantee you, the people that are in the establishment that are doing these things, they were definitely abused as children. They were absolutely treated horribly. They were, put in their place to follow a specific agenda that was multi-generational. It was bigger than them. And, in many ways, I pity them because, they act against their own conscience in so many ways. So, when we do heal from this, when this time of tumultuousness has come to an end, there's going to be a lot more to unpack. But for now, the basics, I consider crypto to be one of them. Have it and have some peace of mind. And if you need help, you can contact me at Empower the People. If you're already a member, you can book a consult with me. You can reach me in various different areas in Telegram. I can provide you some links in the show notes, Travis, that you can publish later. And I'm here for you. I have a lot to offer to the community. I have a lot to offer to the world, and there's no reason not to, because I've been validated internally and externally, not because I was seeking it out, but because I was willing to do something for people. So I think that willingness is really where profound personal change begins.
Powerful stuff, man. Well, Chris,
Well,
it's
that's it.
been awesome. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining me. It's been a wicked show.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Cheers.
And take care.
See you around.